So you mentioned product documentation, Dan. That's more important than we realize, because our switches require a specific level of power, specific voltage. They require a specific operating temperature, as well as humidity levels. We need to make sure that we are putting that switch in an environment based on those conditions. So that documentation is very important. We have to review that. How are we going to install this switch? Is it going to be rack mounted, wall mounted? Are we just going to leave it on a table or a shelf?
Raymond, how are we probably going to install that chassis in a true production environment?
In a true production environment, we're going to rack mount it. We're going to have it in our networking room, in a closet, in a rack. We're going to have to make sure we have the correct network cabling. We're going to have to make sure that network cabling is securely attached into the switch. We don't want to have to deal with layer 1 problems, meaning that is our physical cable plugged into the port? Let's get that out of the way right away. Is there a power switch on our switch? No. We just take that power cable, we plug it in, it turns on. And then we have to go through a routine. We have to verify that the components are working. So the switch goes through what is known as a power-on self-test. Are there other devices in this world, Dan, that go through a power-on self-test?
Every device? The first device that I really got exposure to deeply was the personal computer. I had my 286 16 megahertz computer, and that did a power-on self-test, and all PCs that I've ever known since have done a power-on self-test, and we now get exposed to the fact that these devices aren't really that much different, are they? They're computers that have a dedicated purpose here for networking, but they're still governed by the same parameters as a PC.
So once the power-on self-test is done, it has to find the operating system. It's got to load that operating system. And then it has to load configuration files. So when you compare the actual process here to a PC, as Dan said, really, there isn't much difference. We have to go through all those steps and bring the actual switch up so that way there, it can function the way we intended to. I want you to take a moment right now and think about your day-to-day tasks and where you do those day-to-day tasks. Do you do them with the switch sitting right beside you, with the LEDs blinking in your face? No, we don't. No, we don't. So how much do we really care about these LED indicators? Well, in all honesty, not a whole awful lot, because we're not going to run to the networking room and stare at LED indicators. We can get a lot of information in the command line interface by doing various show commands. But there's something we need to know about our switches and these lights that they have. Dan, when you think about things that are good, what color do you normally associate with good, functioning? Things are behaving as they should.
I know when I'm driving, I want to see green lights. That's good. So I want to see green lights, and I don't want to see red lights. That's an impediment to my progress to getting to my destination.
So red to you is bad when you're driving?
Absolutely. And I choose oftentimes to not observe those red lights.
So if you were to look at a switch, if things were bad on a switch, would you expect to see red indicating that something was bad? Would you expect to see that because of the things we know in the real world?
Yes, and in fact, in some other Cisco gear, red would also be a warning sign to you. However, we need to understand that it in fact is not red that we should be looking for if we do things like fail a power on self-test. If I fail a power on self-test, I'm stuck. I'm stuck, unable to move, just as if we're stuck in amber. What is amber? It's a trap. It's sap. And the color amber is what we should be looking for when we have a challenge with the boot up of a chassis. And that might, in fact, be the only time that I would look at the LEDs of a switch. Unless I'm just observing, I walk into the closet, look at all those blinking, flashing lights. It's doing its thing. But rarely do I get insight into the operations of a chassis by looking at LEDs. It's most likely going to be away from me, and I don't have a webcam pointing at the LEDs on my Catalyst 2960 switches, which might be in the wiring closet.
So I just pulled my shiny new switch out of the box. I could plug a bunch of Ethernet cables into it. Would I be able to access it over the network to administer it? No. I haven't done any configuration to it yet. I need some way to access this switch physically, so that way there I can manage it.
So I'm thinking we need to go back to that console port on the rear end of the chassis on the left-hand side. So let's look at that console port. We can find it, rear of the chassis. Raymond, that's an RJ45 jack, right? It's not Ethernet, but it's RJ45. So what kind of cable do I attach to that port?
We need a console cable, also known as a rollover cable. What does it look like? Well, it's flat. It's sky blue. Older models were black, but traditionally we see sky blue nowadays. But one end, as Dan said, has that RJ45 port. But the other end, Dan, does not have an RJ45 port, does it?
It's got, if we look at it, it's a female connection with 4 pins and then 5 pins. So DB9. That's what it is. It's a DB9. And we think, what used to attach to DB9 ports? We used to have serial mice. We used to have external modems. And the external modems is the most frequent use of the DB9 port, which might explain why it is going extinct. So look for the serial port on your computer, and the serial port will be DB9, and on the personal computer it'll be male, so it'll have the pins, not the holes.
Wait, Dan, wait. You just said extinct. Going away. Let me look at my computer right now. Yeah, you're right. I don't see any on my computers at all. So I'm in a jam here. I have this sky blue rollover cable plugged in to my switch's console port, but no connection on a PC that I could actually use to plug the cable into. I'm in trouble here. What do I need to solve this problem?
I need a port adapter. Port adapters, something that we are probably familiar with. We have DVI to VGA port adapters and, lots of other things. But this one's flaky. You have to make sure that you get a good one. USB, tried and true. But USB to serial port adapters don't all get manufactured with Cisco gear in mind. They just don't. And so test, validate, read the reviews of any USB serial port adapter that you might consider buying before you make that purchase. I do have a favorite one, and it's one that I only had to drive 1.5 miles to get from my local Radio Shack. And the Radio Shack has a brand called GigaWare. This one works beautifully for me. And I say that because I have had others in the past that didn't work beautifully. Now, I'm not trying to make Radio Shack money here. They certainly wouldn't care enough to give me a little extra money. But your mileage may vary on USB to serial port adapters. You're going to need one. Because even if your computer had one right now, has a serial port integrated into the motherboard, then you go on a trip. You only brought your laptop. Laptops don't have these. It would be a really unusual laptop, Raymond, that would have a serial port. So now I think I got the physicality. I got my rollover cable. I got my USB to serial port adapter, and I cabled them all up. What next?
Well, we're missing an important aspect. The software that's actually going to get us connectivity. We need a terminal program to access the command line interface of our switch. And there's many different ones out there. Let's just list some of these off, Dan. We have Procom. We have Teraterm.
Procom, Teraterm. Okay, Secure CRT. I think of the one that I used for far too long, Hyperterminal. But the one that I use today, I'll be honest, is Poderosa. But there's a problem with Poderosa if you just get the base Poderosa free download. It doesn't have serial port connectivity. You can, if you do your homework, find it. But, Raymond, ultimately, the console port is a serial port, and I need to communicate via serial modality, whereas some terminal programs are built for Telnet and Secure Shell. We're not there yet. We can't Telnet or Secure Shell through this port. It's not a network port. It's serial. So how do I tell the terminal program to not use Telnet, not use Secure Shell, but instead communicate through its serial port?
We're going to have to specify the COM port first. And let me be honest with everybody. Sometimes it is a trial and error process that you're going to have to go through. Try COM 1, didn't work. Try COM 2, didn't work. Oh, look, COM 3 worked.
One thing that you might also do is you might go to Device Manager. If you go to Device Manager in Windows, you could look for ports COM and LPT1 or COM and LPT. COM and LPT are resources on your computer. And if you have one of these USB to serial port adapters, under that, it'll tell you, hey, here's your adapter and here's the COM port. But also, Raymond, what I've noticed is usually it's this big COM port. It's not the 3 or 4 we're used to. It might be 23. That, in fact, is what it is on my computer right now. It's COM 23. And it's the very last COM port that exists on my chassis. So that's helpful. Sometimes if I am doing trial and error, I just jump to the very bottom and try that one.
Well, I'm pretty lucky, Dan, because mine happens to be COM 3. I don't have to go all the way down through my list. So thank goodness about that. But we still have to set up some settings here. Usually the default settings will work. Most terminal programs have a speed set to 9600 bits per second. They got data bits of 8. They've got parity set to none. They have stop bits set to 1. And then they have flow control set to none. So those are the default values. And those default values are usually the ones that our Cisco IOS is expecting for communication. If not, you'll want to check the documentation to see what the device is actually expecting. we actually make a console connection to our switch. For example, you just received your switch from Cisco and you need to connect to it. Well, you're going to need your rollover cable, first of all, also known as your console cable, and you're going to have to plug it into a serial port on either your laptop or a PC, and you're then going to have to connect the RJ45 connector into the actual console port on the switch. But there's more to it than just the actual physical connectivity now. We need some type of application that's going to give us the ability to connect into the device via that serial connection. So we're looking for some type of terminal program. And there's a lot of different terminal programs out there. We're not here to say or argue about which one is better than the other. But just to name a few, we got Hyperterminal, Poderosa, Secure CRT, TerraTerm, Putty, as well as Procom, just to name a few, and there's many more out there. So right now, I am actually using Poderosa. There's no specific reason for it. I'm not here to promote Poderosa. You can use whatever you want to use. But right now, I'm going to open up a serial connection because that's what we're doing. We're setting up a serial connection utilizing that rollover cable. We're going to have to pick a port, COM1 through COM4. And folks, you're really guessing here. I think my connection's COM4. We'll go ahead and set this up and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, then we'll try a different COM port after that. Baud rate, 9600 bits per second. That's our speed. Data rate, or data bits, 8 bits. Parity, none. Stop bits, 1 bit. Flow control, none. These are the settings that are expected for the connection with our actual Catalyst switches, as well as our routers from Cisco. And these are usually the defaults that you'll find inside the actual terminal program. So there's really not much we have to change here. Usually we're only having to pick our port, and then we click OK. So let's go ahead and do that. So far so good. Let's hit enter. Great. I have connectivity into ASW1 via the console port.